Okay, I think we're going to get going here. Hopefully everyone's got a chance to get some food and some coffee, but I'm Josh Tyree. I have the privilege of being the CEO for Harris CPAs, and want to just welcome everyone in the room today. And then also we have this online and broadcasting both in our Magic Valley offices, Ketchum, and along with Coeur d'Alene as well. So welcome to everyone across the state. We're really excited about what we have today. I got a little sneak peek yesterday afternoon with Steve, and I think our speakers today are going to be just great and really relevant going into 2023. So I will speak just very briefly on Harris CPAs and kind of what has gone on during the year and where we are and what we're looking at. And I'll try and keep it short as possible so we can get to our speakers. So I always like to start with our mission at Harris. It's what we look at on a constant basis, year to year, and what drives us. In my opinion, it's always what I call a kind of a three-part mission, and we think that all three parts have to be kind of in harmony as we do different projects and do different work. One talks about our clients and the people in this room and our success. The second part is on our community and making sure we support our community and all the different communities that we're in. And then the third part is each other, the team members at Harris, and making sure we're supporting one another as we go through and making sure all three of those are kind of in balance. We have 5 values that we constantly work at Harris CPAs, what kind of our 5 core values: integrity, quality, mutual respect, heart, and united. And so you'll see those 5 things. I'll talk a little bit more about them on how they drive who we are and what we do as a firm as we go through, but it all comes back to this mission. Looking at that and looking at our desire to make a positive impact on the state of Idaho, and we're really concentrated on what we can do to do that. We're always looking for great additions to our firm. And so in the fall of last year, I'm excited we were able to merge in 2 great firms. Dave Hutchinson and H.H. and Associates merged into our Meridian office, and it's going to be, it's already been great over the first 5 months. And then Thomas Johnston also merged in and opened our Ketchum office, which has been fabulous. We had a lot of assurance work that we were already doing in the Wood River Valley, and now to add on a lot of tax and an actual presence and a location there has only increased our ability to create kind of a positive influence in that area of the state. So we're very excited with that. With those mergers, we welcomed 3 partners in Ketchum: Lori, Ryan, and Tim. And so we're very excited to have them on board. And then David Hutchinson here in Meridian through that one. And so again, all very excited about adding people and as well as their clients to our firm and integrating them as we go through. I think it was a couple weeks ago I had, I think he's here, Derek Bastian sent me an article from Wall Street Journal that talked about our profession, the accounting and kind of auditing profession. And over the last 2 years, the profession as a whole has had 300,000 people quit and leave the profession. Like, that's a crazy amount. And we've really, everyone at our firm and our team have spent a lot of time over several years, not only at the universities and supporting them, but internally working on who we are and what we're doing, and really focused on all those values I talked about. And so adding all these people, these are all new people in addition to the partners that we've added. Some are through new hires, some are interns, some are just recruiting, but the ability for us to be able to add great people to our team is a testament to all the efforts that everyone in our firm has been making over all the years and who we are and what we're trying to do. With the outgoing of people in our profession, our ability to add people has really strengthened our firm, and it's exciting. It's exciting to see all the new faces and the increase in our growth, and it's really what has driven the success of our firm over the last couple of years. So welcome to all the new people, as you can see on the screen here, and we're excited about going into 2023. Two things that we do as a firm each year, and this comes back to our values and our mission, trying to impact all three aspects of it, is we work on it pretty intentionally. So we have two processes. One, as a firm, we set 2 to 3 strategic initiatives every year, and then everyone throughout our firm is setting goals and working towards them, and they're all focused. Those initiatives are generally focused at specific things, either our mission or different values. We also do what's called a thematic goal process. And we know we're not perfect at our goals or our values, but we pick one value every single year. We come together as an entire firm and we select one, and we say, we're gonna make a difference on this value this year. We're gonna identify things that we could do even better and get even better at with that value, and then we work on it throughout the entire year. And those are kind of the two ways that we keep what we do kind of centered throughout the year on our mission and our values. The value that we selected we do the thematic goal process in about August each year, and it runs about a fiscal year. So that thematic goal process that we selected last August was United. Since then, we've had a team put on our team building event in the fall. We had Ensemble from Children's Home come and speak, and it was a fabulous day. We had a team, and you'll see another slide here about our community impact and what we're doing community-wise, in addition to all the other things that we already do with the Center of Influence and our industry groups and stuff, but they took it one step further regarding doing some drives towards the end of the year, which is great. And then we also have another group that is led by Kevin in our firm, and they're really focused on coaching when our people inside our firm are taking on new roles or new positions, making sure they have someone attached to them and helping them through those expectations or the new roles and getting some additional training. And then the last piece, which Ryan Still out of our Ketchum office is going to lead in April, is we're really going to look at what we can do to become more united with our clients. We do client surveys every year, and we just got our year-end results for last year. And they do that kind of net promoter score thing. Our industry average is about a 30. When you do those kind of results, we were at about 50, and kind of the top tier is 70. So we look at that as, yeah, we're doing okay. We're significantly better than the average, but we want to be the best. And so that group's really going to look at how can we become more united with our clients. And you'll see some things rolling out of that group, as they start in April and try and finish in July on some projects. So we're excited about those different thematic goals and those projects coming through. Here's just one example of something that came through this fall. We had a community impact initiative, and you can see each of the different offices had charities or nonprofits they were associated with and did different drives and really helped try and support the community during the holidays this December. So it was a lot of fun and a great experience, and hopefully made some good. Our 3 initiatives for next year, this is the second way of how we try and move forward and live our mission and our values. I kind of boiled down into 3 different words: unity, training, and communication. So our training is just us looking at our training programs and increasing our quality and our ability for all of our people, which is now close to 100 individuals in our firm, to get even better at what we do each and every day. Better experts, better technical quality, better in just soft skills and communications, but training across the board and getting that more formalized. We also are looking at communication. I think over the last 2 years, our firm, when we sat down and talked about it, looked at, we've got remote, we've got hybrid, we've got Teams and Zoom, but are we actually looking at, are we communicating the right information and what is the right way to communicate that? So we've got individuals across our firm over the next year that are going to look at different ways that we can reach out to you, reach out to the community, reach out to each other, and how we're going to do that communication and improve on it. The last thing I wrote here, or the top one I wrote, is unity. And that might be probably the largest strategic initiative we had. We've been preparing for this for the entire year in 2022, doing trainings and different things internally in our firm. But that stat I shared before, 300,000 people leaving our profession, and the ability to retain and keep good team members at Harris impacts every part of our mission, right? We cannot influence the community. We can't provide great client service. We can't support each other unless we have people at Harris. So this upcoming year, we have spent a lot of time last year training and trying to get better at it, but are really looking at, we're instituting kind of a 50-hour work week policy. It's the profession. The history of the profession was for 4 months, go work 70 to 80 hours until you can't see straight and get as much as you can done. And that really, when you look at it, that doesn't match quality, right? Especially if you get to the last 3 weeks of tax season. I think that's where you look across the profession, probably 90% of the mistakes are always made. But it doesn't match quality. It doesn't support each other. It doesn't support the long sustainability of our firm, and we want to be the Idaho firm for forever. And so we've got to adapt and change the way we are operating and the way we're supporting each other and the way we're looking at how we get things done in our firm. And it's not just reducing hours, but it's looking for ways to increase productivity. It's looking for ways to combine different things and be more efficient at our job. But it's also looking at ways that we can spread the work out throughout the year as well. So we're looking at every different aspect this year, but really trying to incorporate that so that we can support our people. Public accounting is I'm still here, I love it. But the relationships you get to have in public accounting, and I am biased, the experiences you get to see, the different clients in the industries, everything, it's great. And we shouldn't be losing as many people as we are. They're not moving from firm to firm, they're just quitting the profession. And it's because of the hours and the what some people will call the black hole that they go into, and they lose focus on all the positives and all the great things about our profession. So we're trying to, over last year, now into this year, and probably years to come, to continue to adapt and evolve so that we can retain and support each other, and then as a result, be able to be here to support our clients and our communities as we go forward. So it's a huge initiative for our firm. You'll hear a lot about it as we go throughout the year and continue to work on it. We're going to continue to learn things as we go through this first busy season as we try the best we can to implement it. But we're excited about it. So those are kind of our initiatives. We're excited about all the new, the mergers, the new people we have on board. We're very excited about 2023, cautiously excited about it. I'm sure Steve's going to get up here and tell us there's always opportunities to see, and we believe that regardless of what happens in the economy, we think there are opportunities, especially in our industry and our firm, for us to improve and to do better and to continue to grow and become a great firm. So we're very excited for that. We have a little bit different program. In the past, Tara just told me this is our 10th year doing this. And in the past, we've always tried to parlay an economic speaker with a tax speaker. Well, we've cut out the tax piece. Yes, Robert's very excited. So we've cut out the tax piece. We've got some great speakers, a little bit more forward thinking. I think they're gonna build off each other, and it's gonna be a phenomenal program. But my last pitch, if you were coming here to really wanted to know the tax law changes, we started a podcast last fall, and we actually have two. This is my cheap way of trying to get you to go listen to our podcast. We have two podcasts that we recorded in December, one for individuals, one for businesses, all about tax planning. They're boiled down to, I think, like 15 minutes, not an hour and a half, so they're very short. But if you're just dying to get that tax planning piece, it's in our podcast. Or you can call any of the people here at Harris as well. So anyway, you'll see more of these podcasts coming out as we go forward. We're just trying to get off the ground last fall, so it's a lot of us talking, but hopefully in the future we're going to start bringing in clients and different people that we're working with throughout the industry to be on our podcast and continue to talk about it. And it's been a lot of fun trying to get out of my box as an accountant and do a podcast. It's definitely an interesting experience, but it's been a ton of fun. With that, I will get on to our speakers. Our first speaker, it's Steve Scranton from Washington Trust Bank. Washington Trust Bank has been a great partner for our firm, and this is Steve's fourth year joining us for this event. If you have not listened to Steve speak before that, I'm going off script now, is the only economist I know who can actually give us an entire speech that makes total sense and not use any graphs or PowerPoints or anything, which is always great. Sometimes you get into those economist talks and it's like 37 tables deep and you're wondering where you are, and that's not how Steve speaks. So it's absolutely a privilege for us, and we really thank Washington Trust Bank to allow Steve to come and speak at our event now for the fourth year. He's the Chief Investment Officer and Economist for Washington Trust and holds a Charter Financial Analyst designation with nearly 40 years of investment and economic experience. He serves as the economist for Washington Trust Bank. He does tons of speaking engagements and different communications with their clients and keeps us all informed of economic and investment market conditions, and he travels all over the Pacific Northwest doing this. So again, give me a hand and welcome Steve.
Thanks, Josh. Good morning, everybody. Today I'm going to try and address the three biggest questions I hear most often from people first, and then wrap it up at the end with giving you an update on where the Treasure Valley and the Idaho economy sits overall. Welcome to the listeners from the Magic Valley, from Ketchum, and from Coeur d'Alene. I remind everybody sitting on your table, if you haven't seen there's a card with a QR code. This year we're going to take Q&As that way. Scan the QR code. You could submit your questions on the app then, and Tara will read them off to me when I finish with my presentation. So try and make it a little more efficient for you. So let me go ahead and just kick off. First question I hear from a lot of people is, well, what's going on with interest rates? And where's the end of, it's not me, but yeah. What I would tell you is, we've seen a very aggressive Federal Reserve in 2022 as they were behind the curve and trying to bring inflation under control. And so they reverted to the playbook that we had back in the early 1980s when was the real last time we had a problem with inflation, and they were aggressively raising interest rates. So we've got the overnight borrowing rate right now at 4.5%, which means the prime lending rate's at 7.5%, and then whatever, depending on the business, how much of a additional spread is added on top of that. So for those of you, operating lines, things like that, you've definitely seen your costs going up because the short-term interest rates are going up. And I'm going to tell you that we need to listen to and pay attention to the Federal Reserve and believe what they tell us. And I would say that doesn't necessarily jive with what the financial markets think. But the Federal Reserve has been very clear of saying we are going to continue to raise interest rates until we see inflation on a clear downward path and we see a better situation for the labor supply overall. And they've said over and over again, rates are going to be higher for longer. The financial markets have a belief that, that's not right. As soon as any signs of a recession come around, they're going to start cutting rates. And what I always say is, the financial markets especially, since almost 2/3 of the people in the financial markets on Wall Street have only been in the business for 10 years or less, they've only experienced maybe the last 2 recessions, which I would say were crisis recessions, not traditional recessions. We had the financial crisis, and then we had the pandemic crisis. And yes, the Fed very quickly cut rates then. But if we go back and look at the regular business cycle recessions, it is not unusual for the Fed to continue to hold rates high while the recession is starting, and not start to cut those rates until they see how weak the recession really is going to be. So I would continue to tell people it's better prepare for the worst and get a better result than to believe the financial markets and think that we're going to have the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates by July of this year. I continue to say the financial markets are playing a game of chicken with the Fed. They think the Fed will blink first. And in my 40 years of experience of being in the financial markets, I would tell you the best rule you could ever follow is don't fight the Fed. They are far bigger than any of us, and they can outweigh us anytime they feel like it. So I think they're taking the short-term borrowing rates. They've got a meeting coming up the first week of February. They're going to raise, it looks like, 0.25%. So they're slowing the pace of their rate hikes. But they have been pretty clear. They think they need to get at least to 5%. So that would be 2.25% rate hikes. That would get us by the second quarter. We're at 5%. Some of the Federal Reserve officials said we may have to go higher than that. It all depends on what they're saying now is, Yes, we're seeing inflation starting to come down, but it hasn't come down anywhere close. And they continue to be worried about the dynamic we have going on where we have 11 million job openings and 6 million unemployed people, which means the employee has all the bargaining power, the leverage right now. The Fed wants to get that back to more of a neutral, at least eliminate those job openings. So I'm going to tell you, I think very strongly, the Federal Reserve has decided and is comfortable with the decision that we need to create a recession to break inflation. Because what I tell you from the facts are, going back to 1972, which is as far back as the jobs data goes, we've had 9 recessions from there till now. And of those 9 recessions, by the end of the, not the recessions, we've had 9 interest rate cycles. We've had 7 recessions. We've had 9 interest rate cycles from the Fed, and we've seen in all but one case, when the Fed was done raising interest rates, meaning the first time they started to lower them, inflation was not lower than where it was when they started. What causes inflation to come down, and the Fed understands that, is out of those 9 interest rate cycles, there were 7 recessions. After every recession, inflation was lower than where it was when the Fed started to raise rates. So I think the Federal Reserve can't say that publicly. They get skewered by Congress. They'd be pulled in front of hearings and everything else. But I think the Federal Reserve recognizes we've got too tight of a labor market, and that will inhibit inflation from coming down because employees keep getting big pay increases. They're going to be slower to slow their spending. So I think that's what I tell people over and over again is prepare for 5%, which means you're going to have 8% prime and something above that. One of the big differences that'll go on now, I think that as we go forward here, compared to what we've seen for the last 20 years when the Federal Reserve was interfering in the marketplaces and suppressing interest rates, fundamentals are going to matter now. So a business that is not, a well-run business will probably be able to borrow right around prime. A lesser quality business will now start to see a bigger spread against that prime lending rate because they're a weaker credit quality, where before, because interest rates are so low, the borrowers are in control because the banks needed to make loans and they're competing against a bunch of other ones. So I do say that's something that we should pay attention to, that we start to see that. But the bigger, the next question I get from people is, so are we in a recession or aren't we in a recession? And what I tell people is a recession is unique to every business and every person. I'm not trying to dodge the question. I'm simply saying, if you talk to the minimum wage workers, people in leisure and hospitality, people in retail sales, they would probably tell you, I am in recession already. Because the average worker has had 21 consecutive months where their expense growth was faster than their wage growth. Somebody in a low income who doesn't have a savings account, doesn't have access to credit cards, they're having to make some terrible decisions now about what do I do? Lower the quality of food that I give my family, move into a poorer quality rental. What do I do because I've got this problem going on? Compared to a higher net worth individual who say, yeah, it kind of sucks, but I'm fine because my portfolio is booming, things like that. So what I say is, if we look at the official determination of what is a recession in the US, contrary to what all of our college professors taught us, it's not 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. That's an easy way to give people a concept of it. But the National Bureau of Economic Research determines recessions. They say basically we have 8 indicators we look at. What we use to determine a recession is it's got to be broad, meaning it affects all of the economy. It's got to be sustained. And by that, they are talking like declining growth for 6 months at least. So that's why you get this 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. But the reality is they have 8 indicators. GDP is one of them. Out of those 8 indicators, 3 of them have now turned red and say that would, say we might qualify. So I'm going to tell you the NBAR will not have declared that a recession occurred in the first half of this 2022, even though we had 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. But we are definitely, the third question I hear is, okay, if we're not in a recession, are we heading for one? And this is where you can pull the drapes down now because it's going to get dark when I say yes. I think we are heading for a recession, and I think we're going to be there by the second half of the year, probably in the end of the year. And my reasoning for that, I try and stick with the basic fundamentals rather than all the fancy supply and demand graphs. I just tell people over and over again, the facts are the consumer and consumer spending still accounts for almost 70% of GDP growth. So what's happening with the consumer? Excuse me. I've already told you the consumer has had 21 consecutive months where their wage growth does not match their expense growth. So what has the consumer had to do? They've had to turn to their other bridge financing to get them through. And for most consumers, it's one of three choices. I can either tap my savings, I can use my credit cards, or I can tap my home and pull the equity out of my house. So I would tell you, the third option, if you didn't do it a year ago, by the end of the first quarter of last year, you're probably not doing refinancing on your house, because why move out of a 3% mortgage to a 6.5% mortgage? So that option has gone away for most people now. But then I look at this and say, so what's going on with the consumer on their savings? The facts that I would tell you is, after all of the financial aid that Congress provided during the pandemic crisis, by January 31st of 2021, the personal savings rate in the US was 20%. Today, 2.4%. That tells me they're pulling their savings, not because they want to and they're not going off on fancy trips. They're trying to pay their bills and they're pulling down their savings. Then I look at credit cards and say, okay, because especially the lower income isn't going to have a house to begin with, can't tap equity there. What's going on with credit cards? What I can tell you is from April of 2022 to December of 2022, 8 months, credit card balances rose $193 billion. To give you some perspective, from April of 2009 to December of 2019, 9.5 years, credit card balances rose $196 billion. So in 8 months, we've basically, the consumer has borrowed as much on their credit cards as they did over a 9.5 year economic expansion where they weren't having to tap that. That's where I will make the case. I don't think that increase in balance is because they're doing fun things they want to go do. They're trying to pay their bills, and that's how they're managing that. Yes, they did use their credit cards for the holiday season, and that's why I think what we're going to see now is, first, those bills are coming due for the holidays, which is going to drain them again. But the bottom line is, for the consumer, different than the US government, once your savings is zero, you can't spend what you don't have. Once your credit card hits its max, you can't borrow anymore because nobody's going to give you more credit cards. So I think that the real problem for the consumer is they're running out of those choices. And the bigger problem they're having now is by the fact that they use their credit cards and saying, I can't make my rent payment, but if I charge it on my credit card, then I can make the minimum payment on my credit card. Well, the problem now is that, according to the Federal Reserve, thanks to the actions that they've taken, the average credit card rate right now, is 19%. And the problem is, if you're making your minimum payment on your credit card, you're not paying your balance down hardly at all. So as you've been running that $193 billion up, that unpaid amount has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and interest rates have gotten higher and higher and higher. Suddenly that's consuming more of your income. And what I say for the average consumer, different than the Federal Reserve when they look at inflation, they say, look at inflation ex food and energy, because that's just the volatile components. This is the important thing to look at. I tell people over and over again, the average consumer says, what are you talking about? I only care about food, energy, and shelter. So when we look at food, energy, and shelter, what we see is their inflation rates are not the published rate. We say, hey, great, inflation has come down from 11% down to 6.5%. Guess what? Food prices are still up over 10% on a year-over-year basis. Shelter costs, depending on when you took your lease out last year, they're up double digits. And gas prices, the only one that have started to come down a little, but electricity prices, natural gas prices for heating haven't come down. So what I say is the consumer's core expenses are sucking up their paycheck. And I haven't run a most recent number, but I know when I looked at the US and the Treasure Valley at the end of the third quarter, if you just took those three components, food, energy, and shelter, for the average worker consuming between 35 to 45% of their paycheck, that doesn't leave much room for anything else, especially if you throw in childcare costs. You throw in other things like that that don't get wrapped in there. So that's why my belief is the Federal Reserve understands they can't control supply. They can't control China opening and closing or shipping lanes or things like that. They can control demand by making it unaffordable to borrow. And I think that's what they're doing. And that's why I think the consumer is going to max out by the first half of this year, and then they won't have a choice. They'll have to start cutting back on their spending. And I think that is the Federal Reserve's goal. And part of the reason why I think the Federal Reserve is going to continue to hold rates higher is they are extremely worried about the lessons of the 1980s, that what kept inflation going was a wage price spiral. Far more employees had wages that had cost of living adjustment for inflation. Well, when your wage adjusts with the inflation rate, you're not very motivated to slow spending because you're really not being harmed. That's why they had to be aggressive and raise rates to 20%. Now we see very few people, other than maybe government workers and union employees, that have cost of living adjustments. So the impact of a rate rise from 0.25% up to 5% is just as big an impact for people as when we went from 8% to 20%. So I think the Federal Reserve wants to create unemployment. We've got to get more people in the job market. They can't influence those people who've left the job market and for some reason still aren't coming back to look for work, living with their parents, doing whatever. They can create unemployment by making it so expensive for businesses and other people like that. So I think that's what I would tell you need to watch, you need to pay attention to. I'm looking at, for the traditional indicators that have been leading indicators for recession, all of them are flashing red, except for jobs. Jobs are the anomaly right now, that we're still adding jobs. Even though we say we've got labor shortages, they're still finding people to hire. The problem is it's concentrated in 2 or 3 industries. It's not all across the jobs market. But the problem there is, I think the Federal Reserve feels we've got to create unemployment because that puts people out of work. Then you've got people in the labor force, people who are looking for work again. And maybe you finally start to see cases that you're getting job applicants from qualified applicants and you're getting more than 1 or 2. And so I think that's what I tell you from a national picture. I know that at the time I spend in Boise, people say, I'm not saying that here. Things are great. And I think there's 2 things I would say with that. One, I think part of that might be what I would call selection bias. Whenever you take a poll, it matters who you select. I would expect that most of you are dealing with healthy, well-run companies. So you're seeing the cream of the crop up here that are still booming. They've got backlogs and orders, they've got other things going on, but there's other parts that don't, because what I would tell you is, the Treasure Valley makes up the vast majority of Idaho's economic growth. And when I look at Idaho's GDP compared to the US, they look awful similar. What I would give you the example is, in the first quarter of the year, US GDP was down 1.6%. That was primarily due to trade balance anomalies going on there, which Idaho wasn't really subjected to. So Idaho's economy was an anomaly there. It was up 3.5%. Second quarter, US was down 0.6%. Idaho's economy was down 0.8%. Third quarter, US was up 3.2%. Idaho was up 3.2%. My only message to you is be careful of saying, we're not going to participate in this recession. We're doing great. Because I'm telling you, the Idaho economy moves with the US economy. And once things start to break, I think that's where you'll start to see supply backlogs, or big backlogs of orders can disappear real fast when things start to get bad for people. So I'm just simply telling you, I believe that we're heading for a recession. I think it's the end of, towards the end of next year. So my message is, 1, you've got time to prepare. Those of you who've heard me talk for the last 4 years, you've heard my mantra over and over again, and maybe you took my advice, but I've always said, you as business people already have a disaster recovery plan for environmental disasters. You know what to do if there's flooding or if there's a massive power outage. You know how to go to your playbook, get your business back up and running, within 48 hours and be ready to go. And you follow an objective process to do that. I say over and over again, a recession is a naturally occurring economic disaster, and you need to have a disaster recovery plan for recession, just like you do for an environmental disaster. Because what we know from recessions absolutely clearly is recessions create opportunities. We're going to start what I tell people over and over again, and I know even my wife looks at me and goes, sometimes you sound like you have a sick humor or something. Because I say recessions are a good thing for the economy. It washes out the excesses. It washes out the dead wood. The problem we've had since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009 is the Federal Reserve and the government kept stepping in every time there was a problem. So we short-circuited the business cycle, and we kept a lot of companies, what we now call zombie companies, alive. Interest rates were so low that even though they weren't a well-run company, they could at least roll over their debt and make their interest payments, but they weren't showing growth or anything else. And the problem is, for well-run businesses like yours, you have them as competitors. And you're probably sitting there going, when are these people going to close their doors? They are so poorly run, and yet they're still around. And I think that's what we'll now see with this recession is, I think it's a traditional business cycle recession, not a crisis recession. And I think as a result, the Federal Reserve is not going to step in to do quantitative easing or start suppressing interest rates. They will at some point in time start to lower interest rates, but I think that is the tool they'll stick with unless something starts to develop that goes sideways. Under that scenario, we should wash out the weak players, we should wash out the dead wood, and then what we have is a foundation of well-run businesses that give us the potential for stronger economic growth going forward. Because what we've seen from the government and the Federal Reserve interfering in the business cycle process, during the expansion we had from 2009 to 2019, economic growth was 2.2%. That was the slowest growth we'd had in history over an expansion compared to the normal average was closer to 3 to 3.5%. I would say once again, that's because you had a lot of companies that were dragging on the economy because they should have been shut down and they didn't, and they were causing problems that way. So I do think this isn't the time to crawl under your desk. This isn't the time to say, oh my God, he says a recession coming, I better hide. Let's get down in the storm shelter now. I think this is where you just prepare because the well-run businesses will be ready for the recession and you'll find the opportunities that come from there. So I'm going to, that's my general message to you right now is this is not the time to panic. What I would say, and many of you have heard me say this many times is my best advice to you, turn off your TV. Focus on your business. And if your business is doing well, then continue to focus on what makes it well because you will see the leading edge of the recession coming far faster than the economic data will. You'll start to see changes in your customers, maybe changes in your suppliers. So this is the time where I've said, when people say, what should I do if we're coming to a recession? Brent's going to give you 6 reasons of how to recession-proof your business, so I think that'd be critical to listen to that. My general comment to people is when they say, so what should I do? It sounds like another vague answer again, but it's unique to each of you. I can tell you that we're seeing corporate America as a whole in the U.S., they are holding more cash. Cash balances are rising. They're not necessarily, in some cases, people saying, oh, look, cash balances are falling fairly dramatically at financial institutions. That must be a bad sign. What I would tell you is in reality, since I work for a bank, is that the reason why our deposit balances are dropping is because the financial system is still flush in cash. So nobody's being aggressive about raising their deposit rates because they don't need to. They've got plenty of money for making loans. So what we're doing instead is we're taking our clients' money, shifting it over to the investment arm, and putting them into U.S. government money market mutual funds that are paying between 3 to 4%. I mean, that's what's your best interest for your client. So that runs off the balance sheet of the bank, but it stays with the bank because it's over here, and that money will come back when the business needs to use it. So when I look at those balances, the corporate money market mutual funds are steadily on the rise, which just tells me, my interpretation is corporate America is preparing for the storm. They want to be ready. Other cases may be, this is the time to make sure that you have a solid relationship with your financial institution. What I've told people over and over again, if you are a rate shopper, what we would call a transactional customer, where you're always looking for the lowest loan rate and the highest deposit rate, and you'll switch to another institution when somebody offers you the better rate, you have no relationship with that institution then. So when the hard times comes around for a recession, you're going to have trouble talking to them because they don't know your track record. They don't know who you are really. Compared to if you are loyal with your financial institution, I would say that if you think maybe one of the things I should have in my arsenal to prepare for a recession is a line of credit, well, now is the time to talk to your corporate banker about that while the economy is healthy, while you've got a business plan for how you're going to deal with the recession. Because I'll guarantee you that if you wait until the recession hits and you're really in need of that, it's going to be far tougher to be able to have that conversation then. So I think there's different ways that you can go through that process. But I would just say again, this is the time. The other side that I would say for sure, make sure you're having conversations with your suppliers. I mean, the worst scenario you have is saying, I'm good. My business is good. I got a good game plan. And then your supplier goes out of business. And then you're going, oh, great. Now I got to figure out how to deal with that. So I think those are the type of things I would simply say, be thinking about and say, how do I prepare for the recession? Because if it's coming, I still have time to prepare for that. And then the last question people say, okay, so if we're going to have a recession, how long is it going to be? And I'm going to say once again, if I knew the exact answer for that, I wouldn't be working for Washington Trust. But what I tell you is, when I look at the 5 business cycle recessions we've had, the average is 11 months. So I think that's in general. If you prepare for 11, you're happy if it's shorter. But if you prepare, say, hey, I'm going to believe what I hear on the news. They say it's going to be a mild and short recession. And I'm 6 months in and going, how come it hasn't gotten better? And it isn't very mild. That's why I'd say prepare for the tradition of what has been, and then be happy if it turns out better than that. So now that I've thrilled you with all that positive news, let me give you an update on the Treasure Valley and the Idaho economy. Because your economy is definitely better than the US at this point in time, but you're not immune. I always look through the lens of jobs. What I would tell you is, if I look at jobs growth since the February of 2020, just before the financial crisis, what we see is Idaho has had 6.9% cumulative jobs growth during that time period. The US was 0.7. Treasure Valley, 8.1% jobs growth. And then the Coeur d'Alene in North Idaho, 10% jobs growth. And I apologize to the Magic Valley. We don't have offices in the Magic Valley, so I don't track that economy closely, but I will make a note for next year to have information for that as well. If I look at then saying, okay, jobs growth looks good, how about people? Do we have enough people to hire? Even though I continue to hear throughout the Treasure Valley, I can't find enough workers, the facts say that what we saw was Idaho had 4.5% labor force growth over the last year. Treasure Valley was 4.1%. Coeur d'Alene or Northern Idaho was 3.3%, and the US was 1.8%. So you are getting people in the labor force, but apparently not in the jobs where they need to be. Maybe they're more in other industries, because I consistently hear about labor shortages that way. One of the problems that I think that Idaho has had, and it's a demographic that's going on even before the pandemic crisis, we were talking at our table before the speech, we've seen this demographic shift out of the populous metropolitan areas into what I call the next tier cities. Spokane, Boise, virtually all of Montana, places like that are saying, hey, great quality of life, and I like wanting to do business there. So the Treasure Valley has seen strong jobs growth. Idaho as a whole has ranked close to #1 for the last 10 years for population growth from that standpoint. The problem is, one of the reasons why you've had so much success in attracting businesses to Idaho and the Treasure Valley is that all regions of Idaho, their average weekly earnings are below the US average. So you have cheap labor. Great for a business, lousy for the employee. The closest one is the Treasure Valley. Your average weekly wage is $1,024 a week, compared to the US average is $1,124 a week. So $100 a week less working in Idaho. Businesses love that. Employees hate it, because what's happened with all these people moving to Idaho? Home prices. Nobody talks about home inflation until it comes down to the real life there. What I would tell you, the short and simple is, when I look at the home prices, the median home price in the Treasure Valley compared to the average wage in the Treasure Valley and a 30-year mortgage rate. So when I ran the analysis on Monday, 30-year mortgage rates were at 647 at that point in time. What I would tell you is, for Idaho as a whole, 69% of your paycheck is used up, if it was just one person wanted to buy a house, 69% of your paycheck just for the mortgage payment, which says you have to have 2 incomes to buy a house. The problem with needing 2 incomes to buy a house, if we have a recession and one of those incomes goes away, suddenly we're in crisis with our people with their homes of potentially losing them. Treasure Valley is a little better at 65%. Coeur d'Alene, I'm sorry, but with all of your people moving to the lake and everything else, 104% of your paycheck to make a mortgage payment. I mean, those are unsustainable. That cannot continue. And where I tell you is my concern of saying, what's the risk for the Treasure Valley or Idaho as a whole? If you get the reality that you're unaffordable to live there, your average person can't afford the rent or the mortgage payment, businesses will look to the next cheaper place. And then they'll start moving. I think what we're seeing is people leaving the coast and they're starting to move in. Right now they've just moved in a little. Well, you can still go to Omaha, Nebraska, and places like that and buy a 4-bedroom house, 2,400 square feet for about $250,000. Now, the question is, who wants to live in Omaha, Nebraska? Well, you know what? If you can buy a house, things like that, and you can work remote, you may say, hey, I can live with that. So I think that's what I would tell you. Idaho definitely has done it right. They've got businesses coming here. What we have to solve is the housing situation, because ultimately, housing determines your economy. Because if you can't find somewhere to live, people will move somewhere else. So let me leave it at that and be happy to take questions. Tara, I'm sure you've got some.
So yes, a couple questions here. First, given the structural dynamics and affordability of the local housing market, do you have a prediction of when it will bottom?
Bottom or peak? I think they meant peak because what you want to see is home prices coming down. And what I would tell you is for the Treasure Valley, home prices have peaked. You're down about 5.5% from where you were at the peak. If they really are asking about the bottom, what I would tell you is if I look and say, using the general rule that they've said is that no more than 28% of your income should go to your mortgage payment, home prices need to fall 35% in the Treasure Valley. I don't think that's going to happen because this is not 2008, 2009. This is the fundamental issue in the housing market. You have population moving into your market, wanting to buy houses. You have the millennial generation, the biggest generation in history, at least right now, have come of age. They are now having kids. Having kids and having pets sucks to live in an apartment. I want a house. So I think what's happening is right now they're in apartments because that's all they can afford. But if home prices start to come down, especially if they started to come down, somewhat dramatically to start, I think you're going to see new round of buyers showing up saying, hey, I can afford this now. And so I don't think that we'll see 35. But if I'm just doing the math and saying what traditionally, you're overvalued by 35%.
Thank you. And next, when does the stock market typically bottom in a recessionary environment? Has a lot of the bad news been priced in?
I would say I think a lot of the bad news has been priced in the stock market, but not all of it. And there isn't a specific average to say, hey, it's 3 months into recession. But I think that what I would just say from a fundamental standpoint is we're starting to see right now Wall Street continues to overestimate corporate earnings and not build in the recession dynamics there because they think the Fed's going to bail the economy out. I think what will happen is we're hearing already with the fourth quarter earnings season going on, disappointing earnings. Microsoft just gave their warning yesterday or this morning, saying earnings going forward were going to be much lower than the analyst forecast. So I think we've bounced off the bottom of the worst of the bear market we had in 2022. I think we could revisit that low and maybe even a little lower as the reality starts to come in. What really is the size of this depression when it comes in? How bad are corporate earnings? But I think that Wall Street usually will price, when you bottom in the stock market, is usually in the midst of when it seems the worst in the economy. Because then they're starting to say, okay, things that, we can't get any worse. And they start anticipating the future. Quite often it's that case. That's why we've always told people, and I would suppose most financial advisors are the same, the danger of thinking that you can time to get out of the market and then get back in after it's fallen. Because usually the human psychology is you're watching it go down, and finally you say, I can't take it anymore, you bail out. And then the market starts to bottom, go up, and you're going, I'm not going to be fooled. That's just a temporary thing. And by the time you finally admit that, okay, maybe this is sustained, you lost all that recovery because you're sitting in cash. And you paid 20% taxes on liquidating your portfolio. So I'm going to say when it seems the darkest is probably when the stock market is close to bottoming.
And just a couple more. You mentioned 3 industries that were hiring, and we were wondering what those 3 industries were.
The 3 industries for the U.S. and Treasure Valley, I think, is pretty close. But what we've seen throughout is that, and they account for like 65 to 70% of the jobs growth: leisure and hospitality, professional and business services, education, and healthcare. Those have been your 3 that have been doing the most. As you heard from Josh, you've lost some out of at least the accounting side of professional business services, but there's still, overall, those have had the biggest jobs growth going on.
And last question I've got is the recent push to limit immigration influencing our ability to keep up with labor demands, especially in the lower wage farm and hospitality sectors?
I always tell everybody this is a nation of immigrants. unless you're Native American. And yet now we've got an immigration policy that just doesn't make logical sense. We need immigrants to be able to fill positions that the Americans don't want to fill. Because if we're going to say, no, we're going to be 100% American funded with labor, then you better get ready for $5 a pound oranges and things like that, because the wages you'd have to pay to attract the younger generation to actually do those jobs would have to be far higher. So I've argued over and over again, somehow the citizens of the U.S. need to deliver a message to Congress to get your act together and get a realistic immigration policy, because we need to distinguish between illegal immigration, and if we identify that, we should heavily enforce that. Legal immigration, we should say welcome, because you can fill jobs that others don't. And, we look at, I always talk about Canada. Canada has a far better immigration process than the U.S. Theirs is a means-tested process where basically you have to prove you've got the financial resources that if you come into Canada, you're not going to land on their welfare system as soon as you get here. And so they're actually, taking on jobs and things like that. I think the potential is clearly there, because I'm not confident that we're going to be able to convince the youth of America to start at a manual labor type of job and work their way up in their career. That's always been how it's been filled with immigrants, whether it was coming from Europe originally, now coming from South America. They fill a vital role for businesses, and I think it's got to be legal so you can track them, you make sure they're paying into our systems for the different support programs and things like that. I would much rather have that than the illegal that are being paid cash under the table, and yet they're tapping our support system and costing the rest of us money doing that. Okay. I'll just throw out one last question if anybody in the audience didn't get a chance to submit. And if not, I'll give our next speaker 6 more minutes. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. And I think it's going to dovetail right into what our next speaker, Brent Oetken, is going to speak. I've known Brent for a couple of years now, and it's been great. He's actually been using some of our space downtown originally and helped us get that off the board. He's been a great partner at Harris. So Brent is an experienced entrepreneur with a passion for helping leaders learn how to run their businesses, build healthy teams, and drive growth, and live a balanced life. He's Idaho native who grew up here in his family's small business, and he helps entrepreneurs using the EOS process and tools to clarify their vision and become more discipled and accountable, and create healthy and cohesive teams, especially what we're looking at in the future. It's going to be great. So please welcome Brent and for the next hour. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. So, Steve, can you come to all my talks and speak before me? Because you get everybody all wound up, and now they're eager for something, some lifeline. So, I loved your comment there of having a disaster or a recovery plan or a recession recovery plan. So today, what I want to share with you is some practical tools that you can actually use and implement in your business. I want you to walk out of here with some resources and some action items, if you will. So you should all have a copy of this workbook in front of you. Hopefully at the remote locations, you should also have these. If you don't have one in front of you, maybe somebody next to you has one. We're going to walk through this today. And getting over a cold a little bit, so I'm a little winded and that, so pardon me there. So as Steve was talking about the different recessionary factors, the things that are going on in the economy, there's a lot we can't control, right? We can't control whether we're going to be in a recession or not be in a recession. We can't control the weather. We can't control the traffic here in Boise and the influx of people moving into the valley. We can't control the inflation, all these things that are out of our control, and it can be overwhelming. You can sit here and listen to the things that are coming, and it can be overwhelming and scary at times. But in fact, I've heard that there's something like 80% of life is out of our control. And when you think about that number, it's a staggering number, and you think, wow, I'm going through life, and 80% of it I can't control. I don't have an impact on and be able to dominate. The reality is, though, the 20% that we do have control over makes a profound difference. So looking at the weather, for example, we can't control the weather. We can't control the storms that roll through, but we can create an environment where we're protected from those storms. We can live comfortably. We do that without even thinking about it. And the same thing applies to our businesses and our organizations. So there are recessionary storms. There's all sorts of issues that keep coming down the pike that impact us, that we have to deal with. But there are practical, real things that we can do to address that. And one thing I liked what Steve talked about is there are organizations that have not done a very good job of preparing themselves for how they're going to operate and how they're going to withstand things. Others have done a better job. And the tools that I'm going to share with you today are tools that you can use to help put you in that other category where you actually are in a better position and better able to withstand the storms and the challenges that come along. So, like I said, what I want to do is kind of introduce you to these concepts. These concepts come from the entrepreneurial operating system. It's founded by a guy by the name of Brent Oetken. And EOS is really at a high level about three things. We call it vision, traction, and healthy. So vision from the standpoint of being crystal clear on your vision. Where are you going with the organization? What are you trying to accomplish, and how are you going to get there? Traction is that accountability and discipline to actually execute on that. How do you actually do the things week in, week out that are going to get you to accomplish your vision? And healthy is helping your organization to be a very strong, healthy organization that can really work well together and challenge each other, but actually execute at a high level. And so this comes from the book EOS, book Traction. EOS is founded by, like I said, Brent Oetken. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but these tools, you don't have to be using EOS necessarily for these tools to apply. So don't feel like this is a infomercial for EOS necessarily. In order for this to really take hold, though, and for you to really come out of here with some actionable things, I need two things from you. First is I need you to really rise above your organization, look down on the organization, and be really honest with yourself. Look at the challenges that you're facing. Look at the things that are holding you back. You may be a big part of that. If you've been in an organization that's been growing and you've been having to kind of do everything and you're chief cook and bottle washer, you might be part of the problem of the growth and the insulation of protecting from other things that are going to come down the pike later this year. The other thing I need you to do, though, is I really encourage you to take some steps. So in today's workshop, I want you to come up with, what am I going to do? What's one thing I'm going to take from here that I'm actually going to put into practice? I don't want to just come up here and talk for an hour and you guys are nice and listen to me and all that, and then we all leave and we just go back to the fray of our business. I want you to be able to come away with something that actually makes a profound difference in your life and in your business that so you can put into practice as early as tomorrow. Does that sound fair? All right. So in order to get started, let me get a read on the room. How many of you here are in an organization with under 20 people? Show of hands. Okay. 20 to 50? Okay. 50 to 100? All right. Over 100? Great. Anybody over 250? All right, well, hopefully Harris has an open bar here at the end, or I don't know if they're... All right. Next question is, how many of you are implementing EOS or feel very conversant about EOS currently? Anybody? Okay. How many of you have seen the book Traction before I raised it up here and are familiar with it a little bit but don't know a ton about it? Okay. And how many of you have no idea what EOS even stands for? Perfect. All right, good. We got a good mix in the room here. So this will be great. So like I said, Brent Oetken, the founder of EOS, what he found was that entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, we deal with like 136 things at any given time. We have a ton of stuff hitting us in the face that we're dealing with all the time. And the reality is there's only about 6 key areas of our business that we need to focus in on. If we just focus on these 6 things, those 136 things, those things we're running around and we're always saying, oh, I'm so busy, those things are just symptomatic of a weakness in these 6 key components. So what I want to do is walk us through what those 6 key components are, and then I'm going to do that at a high level because we don't have time to go through everything. I need a couple of hours to do that, and I don't think anybody wants me to go long. So you can see me after. We have some other resources and and opportunities for you if you do want to take a deeper dive into this. But I'm going to walk you through the 6 key components, and then we're going to dive deep on a couple of them here to give you some really practical tools, some that I think are going to make a big impact for you. So if you open your book up, on page 2 there is what we call the EOS model. And the 6 key components that Gino talks about are, the first is the vision component. This is getting crystal clear on where you're going with the organization, what you're about, kind of the heart and soul of your organization, and what are you trying to accomplish in this business. The reality is most of us don't have a lack of vision, we have too much vision. If we have a leadership team of 5 people, say, we probably have 5 or maybe 6 different visions in play, and it just creates a lot of discord and challenge. And so we've got to be crystal clear on what is our singular vision for this organization. Next is the people component. You're not going to accomplish your vision without great people. And everybody here has a unique definition of what great people means for your organization. Now, oftentimes we talk about we want a rock star or superstar or A player. We're going to cut through that and really get down to what makes for a great people and great person for your organization so that we get the right people and not just trying to rely on unicorns to run our business. Next is the data component. The data component is all about running your business on facts and figures, really having clarity as to what is actually going on. And what I see in most organizations, especially entrepreneurial organizations, is really one of 2 things. Either we have no data, and we're just shooting from the hip and just guessing and hoping that we got it right and going with our assumptions, or we have too much data. We're just swimming in data. We have so much information that we really can't make good, quick decisions. We're kind of have that paralysis by analysis thing going on. And so we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of the data that's going to help give us clarity on where we're going in the organization, not necessarily where we've been, and how do we affect change and actually accomplish what we're truly trying to accomplish. What happens when you do that is you're going to start extracting a lot of issues. You're going to see a lot of imperfections in your organization. When you have clarity on your vision and what you're trying to go and where you're going, if you're not going there, that's going to stick out. If you have people and you have a clarity on what you need for great people in your organization, your people are going to stand out. The ones that don't fit that are really going to stand out. The data is going to show you where you're lacking in a lot of areas and a lot of issues in the organization. And while at first that may be like, why would I want that? I want to get rid of issues. I want to eliminate issues in my organization. Well, sticking your head in the sand is not getting rid of an issue. That's not helping you eliminate the issue. That's just avoiding it. And oftentimes what ends up happening is we're running and gunning so much, we're so busy, that we just kind of put duct tape and baling twine on things to just get through next week. And the reality is we just kind of push these issues off. What we need to do, and this is the 4th component, is we need to be really good at understanding what are our issues. We need to clarify those issues. We need to smoke those issues out. And then we need to really understand what is the root of that issue, as opposed to just dealing with the symptom, because most issues, in my experience, are just simply a symptom of a deeper issue. And so when we really dig, get to the root of that issue, we get to the core of really what's going on, and we solve that, we've probably solved 3 or 5 other issues in the organization. And so great leaders are just really, really good at solving their issues. And so we want to strengthen this component by extracting all the issues. We want everybody in the organization eventually to be putting issues out on the issues list, calling those out. If you're in a leadership position, you don't have visibility to a lot of the issues that are going on in your organization. There's a lot of stuff happens that you don't get to see just by the nature of your position in the organization. And so you want your people to be on board with what we're trying to accomplish and smoking out those issues and solving a lot of those issues for the greater good of the organization. And so that's the issues component. The process component is all about really understanding your way of doing business, the right way for you to execute and do business. And so every organization has a handful of core processes. There's probably 6 to 10 core processes in any organization. There's things like your HR process. How do you go out and recruit and onboard and train and take care of your employees and all that's associated with your HR. You have a marketing process of how you get out in the marketplace and get known. And whether you're a for-profit company or a not-for-profit company, you're still marketing and selling and doing things. It may be different terminology and different words, but you have this same thing. There's still a need to bring in revenue, whether it's donations or what have you. So you have your sales process, you have your several operating processes, maybe a customer service process, like a finance process, for example, of how you manage the assets of the business, the money flow in and out of the business, those types of things. What we want to do is we want to clarify what are those core processes to our way of operating. And then we want to just take a 20-80 approach. What's the 20% of the steps in that process that's going to get us 80% of the way there? How do we identify just a handful of core processes? So if any of you have put together process manuals and you have these huge binders full of process manuals and then you get so frustrated because nobody ever follows them, because nobody ever will. And if you haven't done that, don't do it because it's not gonna end well for you. What we would recommend is just take a really simplified approach, just a 1 or 2 page document for each process to really help you clarify what are your processes. You need to simplify it, you need to clarify it, and you need to make sure everybody follows that process. Because it's more important that people actually follow the process than it is you wrote it and put it in a binder and set it on the credenza, okay? So that's the process component. We want to make sure that we've documented our core processes, we've simplified them, everybody in the organization follows our way of doing business. If you've struggled with people, you've struggled with, my people are unhappy, I've got a lot of turnover, we'll talk about the people component, but the process component is another big part of that because people want to know, what am I supposed to do? How do I do it right? Give me training. A lot of times we're so busy, we bring people in, throw them into a position and say, hey, good luck, hope it works. And then we wonder why we have so much turnover and so much frustration. The last component is the traction component. And this is all about taking that vision down to the ground. Gino's fond of saying vision without traction is hallucination. So you can have all the great plans you want, but if you don't have a way to execute day in and day out, week in and week out, you're not likely to hit your vision. And we've all been there. We've come up with goals and plans and things like that, and then only to realize that they don't happen because we didn't really have a good way of executing on that. So that's the EOS model. These are the 6 key components in your business. You have these today. Whether you use EOS or not, doesn't matter. You have these 6 key components, and you need to strengthen these 6 key areas in your business. EOS is just really good at helping you do that. However you do that, my passionate plea is that you just strengthen these 6 key components because this will make a crucial difference, especially if you're at risk with any of the recessionary things that Steve was talking about that are going to be coming later in the year. So the reality is, while we're shooting for 100%, we're probably not going to hit 100%. In my work with my clients, my goal is to get them to 80% strong or better in all 6 of these key components. And it takes a while for that to happen. The reality is most organizations are operating at about 20% strong in these 6 key components. And so what you can do is on page 4, I believe, 3 and 4, there's the organizational checkup. You can take this, hopefully not right now, but you can take this organizational checkup and analyze yourself and how you're doing. That 20% is, we get that number from this organizational checkup. What I will tell you is taking this today, you're probably going to be rating yourself about 50% higher than you probably really are because we have our clients take this before they start with us, then after they've started a little bit and they realize they have better context of what those questions really mean and where they really are. And it tends to be around 50%. That's just my observation. So whatever you get with the results here, take that with a grain of salt. If you rated yourself a 10, you're probably not a 5, but you're probably just hard on yourself. But I would encourage you to take this assessment. Have your people take this assessment. You can actually go online. There's the organizationalcheckup.com, and you can actually take it. It's a free assessment. So encourage you to do that. All right, so let's talk about the vision component. Let's go back around to the top of the model. And in order to strengthen the vision component, as you see, there's 2 things there about how we strengthen the vision component. First is there are 8 questions that you need to answer as a leadership team that you need to be on the same page as a team. The problem is, I've been doing this for over 7 years. I have yet to find an organization where the entire leadership team was on the same page with their vision. And what does that mean in practicality? So, sure, there's a bad person or person that's kind of nefarious or not on board with the organization. That's really few and far between. What I see most often and what's most insidious is we have really good people. We have people that care about us, that love us, that are on board, and it's killing us because we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to handle that. We love them. It seems great. We don't know why it's not working. And it's just kind of this nebulous thing that we have to deal with. And so helping us getting on the same page with these 8 questions is paramount. So if you go to page 5 and 6, the spread there, this is what's called the Vision Traction Organizer. So this is what I use with my clients. Highly encourage you to use this, whether you choose to use EOS or don't use EOS or whatever. Highly encourage you to use this tool because it's a very simplified approach to strategic planning. It's just a 2-page strategic plan, and it really covers all the key things you need to think about. So first of all is core values. Who's familiar with core values? Who has core values in their organization today? Okay. How many of you stole them from somebody else's website? So core values are fantastic, but they get kind of get a bad rap because we don't really know what to do with them. We want them, so we kind of oftentimes fall into some traps. Patrick Lencioni talks about the value traps of core values, where we do grab them from somebody else's website or somewhere else that we saw that we thought, oh man, that sounds really great. Or man, I really wish I was that. Or maybe it's a permission to play type thing where, of course, we need somebody to be, don't steal or be honest or whatever. And so what we want to do is we really want to discover what are our core values, and because they exist in the organization today, but we have to uncover them and really bring them to the surface. But for today, what I want you to do is go ahead and write your core values in. And this feels like kind of a test because now you're like, I raised my hand, but I don't know what my core values are. So if you can remember them, write them here at the top. If you can't remember them, or if you don't have core values, we have a cheat sheet for you. Go to the next page, page 7. There's some examples of some core values. What I'd like you to do is real quickly, just go through and pick up 3 to 5 core values and write them back in on page 5 there in the blank. If you have employees. If you don't have any employees, I guess don't worry about it, but we're not going to make you say them or anything like that, so don't feel weird. But do write them in, do participate, because we're gonna build on this as we go along. Okay? So when you have your core values and you've discovered what they are and they're truly real to who you are, what core values do is they help you surround yourself with the people that really fit your culture, fit you, who you want to surround yourself with. They are the heart of your organization. Your core values need to be so strong that even if it became maybe a competitive disadvantage, you would still hold true to these core values, okay? And you want to make sure that you have people that you're surrounding yourself with that just have and exhibit these core values in your organization. We want to hire with these core values, using it as a filter mechanism so that we're not bringing in people into the organization that don't fit our core values. We need to fire based on our core values. We need to review and recognize and reward our employees based on our core values. It's very, very important that we get it right as to what our core values are, and then we use them religiously throughout everything that we're doing. Okay? Next is a core focus. So this has been called mission statement, vision statement, hedgehog concept, all sorts of different things. Apologize to throw another term at you, but we call it core focus because it really comes from the core of who you are as an organization, and you need to stay laser focused on it. So if you've heard Simon Sinek talk about start with why and that sort of thing, it's kind of encompassed in here. We're talking about why you exist as an organization, your purpose, cause, or passion, and what you do well. What is your niche? When you have that clear, it really is the soul of your organization. It helps you really stay focused on what's important, and it's a guiding mechanism, a filtering mechanism, so you don't chase what our clients call shiny stuff, where you're off running around doing things that are totally random. So let's say you're a CPA firm, and now you want to get in the oil and gas business. And you think that's ridiculous, but there's examples of things like that happen, where it's like, why in the world did they come up with that total off-the-wall business plan? It has nothing to do with the business. We need to stay true to who we are. And there's lesser examples of that, of why this works, but the core focus is huge for helping us stay focused on our sweet spot in the organization. Next is the 10-year target, and this is the big long-range goal that we have for the organization. What are we trying to accomplish here as an organization? And I like the 10-year target to actually talk to the core focus a little bit. Talk to why we exist. Sometimes people just put like a number. We're going to be $100 million or whatever. your staff, especially lower level staff, probably doesn't care about this being a $100 million company. They don't know what that means. They don't have any context to what that is, and they're not an owner. So what about you're going to touch 1 million lives through your process, and it speaks to your revenues or whatever. But come up with a 10-year target that really encapsulates and motivates you and your people to what are we really trying to build here and what are we trying to do? And I would encourage you to use core values, core focus, and your 10-year target in your hiring. Help draw people to you and repel people that shouldn't be in the team because they have no interest in doing that. Okay? Next is the marketing strategy, understanding who is your ideal client, who you should be talking to, and what you should be saying. What are your uniques that really resonate with your ideal client? There's some other things in there, the proven process and guarantee, but we really want to be crystal clear. We want to make sure that all of our resources, all of our messaging, all of our marketing, everything is going toward that, and our people understand who our ideal client is, who we should be servicing, and who is the best we should be working with. Up to this point, we've had a lot of run on, we just can't help but get business in the door. There's all sorts of stuff happening. And I would say not all business is great business. I was just talking to a gentleman the other day who said we've been breaking records every year, but the staff is just frazzled, they're frustrated, it's no fun anymore. And the point is, you need to be working with the people that really resonate with you, that are really going to help you achieve what you want to achieve, because probably 20% of your customers bring you 80% of the revenue, and the other 80% of the customers just bring you all of your problems and very little revenue, probably 20% of your revenue. So really getting clear on understanding that can really start make your life a lot better, and theirs, because they're not happy either. Next is the 3-year picture. So this is all about getting a clear crystal picture of what this is going to look like 3 years from now. And again, like I said earlier, I've never had a team that I've started with that ever could answer the same answers on the 3-year picture, which seems like they should. What's our revenue going to be? What's our profit going to be? Maybe another key measurable. 3 simple questions. And so what we want to do, what happens with that, like I said, is we start going at cross purposes. Even if we're good people and we are well-meaning, if I'm building a $10 million organization and you're building a $100 million organization, even though we're doing the same business, we're not building the same type of organization. We have different priorities, different issues, different things that we think that we should be tackling, and it creates conflict. But the problem is it's not enough conflict for us to really put our finger on it, so we just fight each other a little bit and pull at each other. Contrast that to what if we all had one singular thing we were working toward? We would be helping each other and supporting each other and encouraging each other and solving issues for that one thing. That's why everything gets so much easier when you have a great, clear 3-year picture. You're much more likely to achieve it, but you're also able to go to the bottom page, the traction page, and really come up with a great 1-year plan. So what is our plan for this year? What are we going to do this year based on that 3-year picture? Oftentimes, we have so much, there's so many opportunities, so many things we can take advantage of, but when you don't have a really good, clear picture of where we're going, we don't really know how to prioritize and plan for the year. Or we come up with 25 things we want to do in a year. What I encourage you to do is less is more, 3 to 7. How many of you have only 3 goals for 2023? Perfect. It's a challenge to get to 3, but I would say that when you have 3 goals, if you've filtered through from a whole bunch, then you're going to be very laser effective on what you need to do, and you're more likely to accomplish those 3 than not accomplish 7. So simplify, less is more, really focus on what do we really need to get done that's going to help us get to that 3-year picture. Now, a year plan is great, but that's a long time, especially with human nature. And so we only have about 90 days in us before we start to fray and get off track and get distracted. And so what we want to do is break this down even further and say, okay, so what are we going to do this next 90 days? And this next quarter, what are our priorities? So we call them rocks. They're simply quarterly priorities. They're just, what are the things, the activities, the priorities that we need to really focus on this 90 days that's going to help us achieve our 1-year plan and move us toward our goals, help us to actually get what we want out of the business. Same concept here of revenue, profit measurables, and then just a handful of company company rocks, company priorities for the quarter. The last thing you see on there is the issues list, and this is just simply getting it out of our heads, the things that are holding us back, the challenges, the obstacles, could be opportunities that we could take advantage of. You know, we talk about recessionary times and everybody kind of sucks in and it's like, oh no, and what's going to happen? And we kind of go down to a dark hole. But the reality is there's a lot of opportunity in recessionary times. A lot of great companies are birthed in recessionary times. And you have a lot of opportunity because if you get your house in order and you have the right people, which we're going to talk about here in a second, and you have a clear vision of what you're trying to do, and you give yourself some margin to actually think, you can start capitalizing on these opportunities that pop up. And you don't have to be at the mercy of everything that's going to happen. And so there's a ton of potential in recessionary times. So getting those issues out on the issues list and then working with your team to actually solve those issues, figure out how to make them go away forever or take advantage of opportunities that are presented to you. All right, so questions. You do the scan on the thing so we can make sure that we get questions for everybody, especially those in remote locations. Please feel free to put your questions in. Let's talk about the people component. So how many of you here have heard of right people, right seats? Right? It's pretty common, right? We've heard that phrase. Do we really know what to do with that? I mean, it makes sense. We're like, yeah, right people, right seats, and then I don't know how to get it. I mean, we should have right people, right seats, right? We don't really teach what to do. So Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, talks about that, talks about the need to that. We inherently understand that, but how do we actually make that happen? And so this is what I'm going to introduce you to here on page 8 is a tool called the People Analyzer that's going to really help us clarify and understand, do we have the right people in our organization? So in the people component, there's two facets to that we talked about, right people, right seats. So looking at right people, what I'd like you to do is on the People Analyzer, write your core values across the top. So the ones you put on the first page, write them on the top there on page 8. And then what I'd like you to do is I want you to think of 2 people in your organization. I want you to think of one person that is just, man, if I could clone this person and have 100 of them, I could take over the world. This person would be fantastic. I love this person. They just fit my culture great. Put that name on there. And then pick somebody that's not that. Your least best, I'm sure all your people are great, but your least great person, write that name on there. Maybe the person that's kind of like sandpaper on a chalkboard to you, put their name on there as well. Okay? Does everybody have their core values across the top? Okay? You can pretend that you do too, that's fine. All right, so what you're going to do with this tool is you're going to, we're going to rate this. And all we're doing is it's an awareness tool. It's just helping us bring to the surface, what are we really feeling on the inside? So there's 3 ratings. It's just a 3-scale rating. It's plus, minus, or minus. So plus is most of the time, this individual exhibits that core value. Okay? So that's doesn't mean 100% of the time, it's just the majority of the time, they do exhibit that core value. Minus, seldom did they ever exhibit that core value. Rarely do I ever see them exhibit that core value. Plus minus, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Just kind of a hit or miss. Okay? So go across for each core value on each person and put a plus, minus, or minus. Do that for both people. Those of you that are participating are going to get more value out of this exercise, so just saying. And then what you want to do is where it says the bar down at the bottom, you want to decide what is your minimum standard. So how many pluses and how many plus minuses are you willing to accept in your organization? So no minuses. I don't think any of us would like somebody that doesn't exhibit a core value. We recommend at least 50% pluses. If you have 4 core values, for example, I would encourage you to have 3 pluses, 1 plus minus perhaps. Whatever it is your bar. Now what you can do is you can look at the people that you rated and you can say, how do they compare to the bar? Are they at the bar or above the bar? That's great. If they're below the bar, that's an issue. Now, if you haven't told the people about your core values, or you didn't know them either, and you don't know what they are, and you haven't internalized them, it's not fair to do harsh discipline on a core value people don't know, right? So we have to share our core values. People have to understand the core values. We have to communicate that to them. But once we've communicated that to them, we need to have that conversation with them. It could be a coaching conversation. How do we coach them up? How do we help them get better at exhibiting that core value? Sometimes, especially if you have somebody that has a bunch of minuses, that's probably something that's going to take a long time to coach up. I heard there was a Harvard study that said somebody that was not a core value fit and not very competent in their job, it takes twice as much to get them. Basically, you could hire 2 people that do fit to just get them up to par. And so, economically, you need to make that decision too. Is it worth the time and investment to get them up to there? Do they even want to do that? That's the other part of it, right? And that's the challenge. Okay? All right, so normally I open up for questions, but since we have people online, I want to make sure we have the microphone and stuff. So please, if you have questions, again, scan that, put in your questions so that we can get those answered. Page 9, we're going to talk about right seats. So we talk about right people, right seats. Now, in EOS, we actually teach it a little different. We say structure first, people second. Sounds harsh. People analyzer, sounds harsh. But what we're doing is it's a clarity tool. It's helping us to understand what's going on. The structure, having the structure first is actually very, very positive for your people. If you will start by creating the structure of the organization, sitting down and mapping it out, you're giving a gift to your employees. Because we typically don't do that. We have a great person and we want to hire them on, we'll just find a place for them. I would say that's laziness on our part. It's bad leadership and management on our part, and we're setting that person up for failure. We're not really helping them be the most successful they could be. What I would encourage you to do is think differently. If you look at this accountability chart, look at the very bottom here. We have marketing, sales, operations, finance. In any basic organization, you have these 3 basic functions. And your organization's probably somewhat different, and so we'd want to map that out and figure out what your structure needs to be. But just in this example, there's 3 basic functions. In the world of accountability, there's one additional function called the integrator that really drives the accountability to the organization. They oversee everything, they're making sure everything's running on time, they're removing obstacles and barriers, just helping us execute on the business plan and make sure things work really well. Now, a large percentage of the time, we also have another seat called the visionary seat. We don't have to have a visionary seat in every organization, but when we do have a visionary seat, we really need to call it out. Because a visionary is completely different, wired completely differently than an integrator. A visionary is a big picture, big idea, big relationships person. They're big on culture typically. They love to solve problems, where the integrator is more about execution, doing things on a repetitive basis. You tell a visionary, we're going to do something repetitively, and they're checked out. They're like running for the hills. Visionaries do not like to do repetition, and that's not their gifting, and that's fine. But the problem is, many visionaries have ran their business and they're in that integrator seat because they've had to be, and they need to get out of that seat. It's time to delegate and elevate and find an integrator that can really run the business and get that visionary integrator relationship in place. And we've seen this in practice. Henry Ford and John Cousins, Walt Disney and Roy Disney. Walt Disney would not have been able to accomplish everything Walt Disney accomplished without Roy. He had to have the integrator to help execute on that and create the sanity to that. We need the same thing in our organizations. So once we've clarified what the structure is for our organization, what the functions are in our organization, then we need to go back in and say, what are the roles for each of these functions? What are the things that we need the people to be accountable for? Not the tasks. We don't need you to do this thing. We need you to be accountable for this thing. So, for example, under operations, we have LMA, which stands for leadership and management. Great leadership, great management drives accountability. So it's everything about leading and managing. Customer service, process management, making the product, providing the service. That's what they're accountable for. How they do it, all the tasks, that's separate. We are just at a high level, 5 things that they're accountable to deliver for the organization. Once we have that clear, then we can bring people in and say, okay, so how do you stack up to this? Do you want this seat? Do you get it? Do your wires connect? Do you have the God-given talent to do this thing? Do you want to do this job? There's a lot of people in jobs that they don't want to be. You're probably sitting in multiple seats yourself, and you don't want to be doing all of those seats. right? But you kind of feel like you have to. And it's a reality, but it's still an issue. The other thing is, do they have the capacity? It could be time. It could be maybe the mental and emotional capacity. It could be the acquired skill and ability to do the job. We need to understand, do they really fit this seat? Because the last thing we want to do is put somebody we really like and put them in a seat that they're going to fail, right? So if you go to page 11, there's a tool called GWC. So that talks about what I just said there with get it, want it, capacity. A quick way to really understand, do they really fit the seat that they're in? So if you go back to the people analyzer on page 8, what I'd like you to do across the top where you wrote in your core values, I want you to put GWC after that. And then down at the bottom on your bar, I want you to put yes or no. Or excuse me, on the bar, put all yeses. Yes, yes, yes. They have to get it. They have to want it. They have to have the capacity. So your bar is whatever combination of pluses and plus minuses for the culture, for the right people, and yes for the right seats. Now you have a tool that you quickly ascertain, do you have the right people in the right seats in your organization? Okay, so I highly encourage you to take this, run your people through this, run yourself through this, and really get a picture of where are we? How do we fit in this? You're not going to take this tool, and encourage you not to take this tool and just go out and start wholesale firing people. That's not what this tool is about. This tool is an awareness tool. It's just to help you see what you're dealing with and see what you have to work through and the issues that you have to deal with. So we have a people analyzer. Now we have issues. That gets us to the issues component. Don't think we're going to have enough time to get through all of that, but you're going to see how this works. You start smoking out an issue, and you have to prioritize that issue. So you maybe have an issue with somebody that maybe doesn't want the job that they're in, but maybe you don't have a choice right now. Maybe you just have to stick with that for the time being, but you know it's an issue. And if you just turn a blind eye to that issue and you never do anything about that issue is going to become an ugly issue at some point. And you're going to be sitting there scratching your head why this person left when they were a great person, because you didn't actually take action on it. All right? All right, so page 13 and 14 talks about scorecard. We're not going to be able to have enough time probably here to go through the scorecard, but essentially what it is you want to pulse on the organization. You want to have clarity of what are the metrics, the leading indicators on a weekly basis that's really going to help you get a pulse of the organization. Too often, like I said, we either don't have any numbers or we have way too much. And a lot of times we're looking at lagging indicators. We're looking at the things that happened. We're looking at the P&L. Well, the P&L is done. That was before. And if it takes you 3 months to sell something, a sales cycle, you've got a long way to go to correct this problem you just identified. And so what we want to be looking at is what are the weekly numbers that's going to lead to the outcome that we're looking for. So if we have a 3-month sales cycle, but we know we have to do X number of sales calls a week, then we should be looking at that. And if we know that our sales calls drops off, we know eventually we can extrapolate that we're going to have a big problem in 3 months, as opposed to we have a problem and now we have 3 months before we can even fix it. Okay? These are the types of things that help you recession-proof your business. These are the types of things that if you take this seriously and you put the work in, you can actually put stuff in practice so you can see things coming. If you start seeing a dip in something, you can actually be proactive to fix it and put something in place so you're not reacting to it and you're not just getting hammered by everything that's coming down the pike. This is what the healthy companies do. So there's some examples of some measurables. I hesitate to give you those because you need to discover them for yourselves. You need to sit down with your leadership team and really work through this process. It takes time. When I work with my clients, it takes us a lot of time to really get a scorecard that they love and really works really super well. Okay, so let's skip to page 17. We may come back to issue solving here if we have time. But another tool I want to leave you with is what we call the level 10 meeting agenda. So show of hands, and I apologize I can't see the people remote, but you can do this at your remote sites as well. How many people would rate your internal meetings, let's say even with your leadership team, how many of you would rate your meeting below a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10? Okay. 10 being best, by the way. Okay, how many would say it's between a 4 and a 6? Okay? How many would be say between a 6 and an 8? Okay? And 8 and above, 8 to 10? Okay. So, how many of you love your meetings? The people that raise the 10s, yeah. Okay, so if I was going to a 4 or 5 or 6 or less meeting, I wouldn't like that either, right? It's ineffective, it's a waste of time, it's super frustrating, we've all been there. So this is what we call a level 10 meeting. So this is, how do we have a meeting that's gonna get us to a level 10? How are we gonna have an excellent meeting that we actually are happy to have this meeting and it's saving us time and we're actually getting stuff done? So what makes for a great meeting is 5 things. We need to start on time, we need to do it the same day at the same time. So we need to pick a day for this meeting and not move it. How many of you move your meeting around to accommodate people's travel schedules and everything else? Okay, not many, but good. The meeting, as soon as you move a meeting, it totally loses its effectiveness. So you've got to keep it the same day, the same time. It needs to start on time, it needs to end on time. That's super important. And you need to make sure you follow an agenda every time. And so this agenda is what I have my clients use. I have construction, manufacturing, professional services, nonprofits. I have credit unions. I have a myriad of different clients. They all use this level 10 meeting agenda. They all fight me on it at the beginning, and then they all love it. So a little blind faith here. So what we start out with is a segue. So we have just some personal and business good news, just a way to connect as individuals. Super important. There's a lot of psychology that goes in that, so don't skip that part of it. You do your review on your scorecard. You do a review on your rocks. Rocks are those quarterly priorities. And with those, you're just reporting on track or off track. You're not discussing. You're not getting down a rabbit hole with any of that kind of stuff. It's just on track or off track. You're doing a customer employee headlines. Just a quick headline. It's not the article, it's the headline. You're just sharing what happened. And if we want to talk about it, or if there's a rock that's off track or a scorecard item that's off track, we drop it down to the IDS portion. That's the issue solving portion. And then we'll prioritize how we want to discuss that. The to-do list, we've baked in a little seven-day action item to-do list. So what we're saying is, here's something that we committed to do in 7 days. Is it done or not done? And people have to report, done or not done. They don't get to say anything else. They just say, done or not done. Not done, we drop it down to the issues list. So this is a 90-minute meeting that I have my clients do every week. 25 minutes is this first part. That's just reporting part of the meeting. This leaves them 60 minutes to really dig into solving issues. And so there's the issue solving track. We're not gonna have time to go over that today, but we have a specific a process of how we solve issues. Because most of the time when we solve an issue, we just start free-for-all discussing, and we haven't even identified what the real issue is. And so maybe the issue is taxes, but there's 3 different things about taxes. We didn't pay our taxes. Do we owe taxes? Do we have to do something about preparation or what? I mean, so we just have this mosh pit of discussion that goes on about stuff. So we have to be really disciplined. So I encourage you to look at the issue solving track. But we want to go through and solve the issues, prioritize the issues. 1, 2, 3, just pick 3, and then take issue number 1 and start solving it. Once you've solved issue number 1, go to issue number 2, go to issue number 3. If you get done with 3 issues and you have time, pick another 3. And just keep doing that until you're done with your 60 minutes. What you've done is you've built in discipline, you've prioritized, and you're discussing and solving, you're spending your time on the most important things you should be talking about. From there, then you move to conclude. So 5 minutes to the end, you say, okay, we got to wrap up. So we want to recap the to-do list. You know, I committed to this, you committed to that. Make sure we're on the same page. Any cascading messages that we need to roll out to anybody else. So we oftentimes in meetings, we make decisions and then we forget to tell the people that it affects, and they love that. So we want to make sure that we cascade things down and let other people know what decisions we made and information needs to be shared. And then we rate our meeting. So this level 10 meeting is your meeting to rate. You rate the meeting. And if it's a 4, then you guys discuss why it's a 4 and how do we get it to be a 10. So we're wanting to get this, like I said earlier, I'm trying to get my clients to at least 80% strong in these 6 key components. So 8 to 10, I'm looking for an 8 to 10 on this level 10 meeting agenda. If it's anything below that, that's an issue. We need to put it out, we need to figure out, we need to discuss it. So imagine taking this back to your teams and you say, our meetings are a 4, what can we do to get those to be a 10? And you rate your meetings and you real time correct those every week when you have your meeting. It's super powerful. This is why everybody that does this loves this meeting. It saves the one-offs. This 90 minutes, which probably is like overwhelming maybe to some of you to say, how could I possibly spend 90 minutes? I have lawyers that are on a leadership team, and I'm asking them to spend 90 minutes, and they look at me like I have three eyes because they're all highly paid and they're hourly. They're billable, right? And now they love this. This has saved them so much time because it's such an effective meeting. So I encourage you to use this tool as well. All right, so we're nearing the end, and I want to leave some time for some questions. Before we get into the Q&A, there are a couple different options, some resources available. So I think we have a slide that kind of got goofed up. There's actually 2 scan-to-text codes. Both of them go to the same place. They're going to pull that up on the screen here. You can scan that with your phone, and it'll open up a text message, and or you can. Well, some of the stuff left. So you can also just text 53123 and then text the word Brent to 53123. What that will do is it will send you my contact information. There will also be a link on there for a Google form. You can click on there, and there's 3 options of additional information if you want it. One is if you would like to take a deeper dive with just your leadership team. Bobby's a colleague in the back there, is here helping me today, and we'd be happy to set something up and sit down with you and take this through specifically with your leadership team to help you get these tools in place. Another option is we're going to do some follow-ups here in the coming weeks as a follow-on to this thing for Harris CPAs. And so we will actually be in the different markets. And so if you're in Sun Valley, you're in Twin Falls, Coeur d'Alene, what have you, let us know, and we're going to be doing follow-up sessions and taking a little deeper dive with the tools at those sessions as well. So, and then if you'd just like to have a call, you just want to reach out, there's that box. You can check any or all of those if that's of interest to you. So we're not going to spam you and hound you. We just want to make ourselves available if you would like some more information and have some additional questions. So with that, let's open up for Q&A. Do we have any questions that came in? No questions? You guys got it all figured out. That's great. So anything in the room, any questions that came up as we were going through that? Specific, what question do you have and how this would relate to your specific business? Yeah.
I have a question on the 3-year plan. How often do you update that? Is that something that you set and then you evaluate?
Okay, so the question was on the 3-year picture, how often do we update that? And we update that every year with our clients. The 10-year target stays fixed for the 10 years, and then the 3-year plan, or 3-year picture rather, is adjusted every year. Great question. While you're thinking, another question that comes up often is relating to people. So there's a couple of key people issues that come up. You have a right person, wrong seat. So this is a person that you really love. They fit your core values. You really like this person. They're great. Maybe they've been with you forever, but for whatever reason, they just don't fit the seat anymore. And the challenge there is hopefully we can move them to another seat in the organization and find a place for them. But the reality is, if that's not the case anymore, we've got to be able to be strong enough to make that change. And we really need to make that change for them as much as it is for us as the organization. It's not fair to them really to be in a seat where they are languishing and are unhappy, and it's not great for the organization, and it's also not good and it's not fair for your other employees. So that's a tough one because we really care about the people, but if we truly care about them, we got to make the tough call. The other one sounds easier, but I think it's almost harder, is wrong person, right seat. So this is the person that you can't stand, or they undercut you, or they don't fit your culture, but man, they're so stinking productive, and they just really, maybe they're in sales and they're just blowing out the number, or they're in production and they're just super productive in what they're doing, wherever they're at in the organization. We can't let go of them. If we let go of that person, everything else falls apart, or we're gonna put so much burden on everybody else. And I'm telling you, I've seen it time and time and time again. That is killing you. It's like a cancer in your organization, and you gotta have to step up and make that decision. And it really comes down to leadership. It comes down to your ability to lead. what I find is most people we're super nice. We're not these titans of commerce that are out there just slashing and burning. We're normal people that are just trying to do a good job. And it makes it really difficult. And so that's why I encourage you to lean in on these tools, because it gives you the clarity and it gives you the opportunity to talk about these things. When you have clarity on your accountability chart to say, this is what we need and this is our expectations and these are our core values and this is who we are as an organization, people get it and they realize I'm not that, and they exit themselves. Most of the time, you don't even have to fire anybody because we just have such clarity. The reason things get icky and gross is because we don't need clarity, because we're not doing a good job of leading and managing like we could be. So, anything else?
You kind of talk about the people analyzer from okay, we've onboarded somebody and we're moving forward. Do you have any commentary on how we identify a match on core principles or pre-onboarding?
So like in the interview process? Yeah. Okay. So the question was, how do we use the people analyzer, use the core values in our hiring process to make sure that we're filtering and getting the right people? So a couple things. I'm not an HR person, so if there's any HR people here, they can probably speak to this better than I can. But first of all, we can ask good interview questions that speak to that elicit a response around our core value. So maybe asking them something that is going to give us an indication. Are they really hard, are they somebody that loves to work hard and play hard, or are they somebody that just wants to just coast? So we can kind of ask some questions that kind of point to that. What I also like to do, or like see companies do, is at the end of the interview cycle is maybe have the visionary actually sit down and do what we call the core value speech with them and say, okay, so this is who we are. You've made it this far, but I just got to tell you, this is who we are, and this is what we're about, and if this doesn't fit for you, that's no problem. You just, don't move forward. And so we can have that. Sometimes if you do that early in the process, people are busy gaming the system and trying to say whatever needs to be said. So I encourage that to be kind of at the last step of the process. Does that answer that for you? Does that help? Yeah. Also, we use the people analyzer on a regular basis. So using it for hiring is fantastic. In fact, I had one client that said, it's like I got a new partner in my business because it's just helping me actually execute well and have the right people around me. But we want to use the core value or the people analyzer and our core values consistently. Every quarter, we want to be going through this and sitting down with our employees and saying, hey, how do you feel you rate on these? And here's how I think you rate on these. And we just have an open conversation. It's not adversarial. This is not an adversarial tool whatsoever. It's so great to just create clarity and help us have a conversation and get us all on the same page. Because at the end of the day, that's all we really want anyway. We're wanting to execute well. We want to do what we love to do, be on board with everything, and we want to make this organization do well. Okay? Anything else? All right. Well, you have the links. Go ahead and fill that out. What I would leave you with is, as I started, is you have an opportunity to affect the change this year. You can't control all the stuff that's going to happen, but there are lots of things that you can control that are going to make a big impact in the organization. It's only if you choose to do it. And so I hope you take some tools from here that you can put into practice. If there's anything that Bobby and I can do to help and encourage you with those, or hold you accountable to those, or give you more details and information, please reach out and we'd be happy to help. So, and I'll get you a traction book for asking a question and how. So, and Sharon doesn't get one because she already has a whole bunch of them. So, all right, thank you.
So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. I hope, I know it's kind of an interesting year in that most of us had really good years last year, but we kind of see what's coming on the horizon. So hopefully Steve's information and Brent's information gives you some tools to think about as we go into 2023. I know Harris is still taking the approach where we're optimistic about finding those opportunities, whether it is a recession or not. We think that we can help our clients and each other in this room, get through anything. And so we're excited about the upcoming year, and we hope you guys are too. For those extremely, I'll say, cool people in the crowd who are CPAs who need CE, make sure you sign out before you go out so we can issue that. The rest of you who don't need that, don't worry about it. So, but anyway, thank you again to our speakers one more time, and thank you again for all of Harris. And then last piece, 10 years we've been doing this. Tara Davis in the back, can you raise your hand? She has been with us for all 10 years, putting this event on every single year. And now this event is across the state, which is all due to her. So for our speakers and for Tara, another round of applause, and thank you again.